If you're a Clay-enabled rep, you're going to sell more. And if you have a Clay-enabled sales force and marketing force, to the moon.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Bill Binch. I'm an operating partner here with Battery Ventures, and welcome to the next episode of the Sound Bites podcast. Really excited by our guest today. She is in the middle of this maelstrom, or let's use one of the old crossing the chasm terms, the tornado, the vortex of sales go to market right now. We have Becca Lindquist, the head of revenue for Clay. Welcome, Becca.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bill. And a tornado is a great way to describe where we're at right now in Clay's growth journey. So apt
Ev-
choice.
Everybody's hearing about Clay, so I'm really looking forward to breaking this down with you today.
Sure. Yeah, excited to chat. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with Clay. We'll dive into a little bit about how you're selling, what you're seeing out there in the market. Obviously, there's a lot going on around the go-to-market engineer concept, which I
Yep.
think a lot of credit goes back to Clay for. So I definitely want to dive into those. But let's maybe just set the table for our conversation today and talk about Clay. Uh, you recently, as an organization, surpassed 100 million in ARR. That was last year. You just opened up your European operations. You're defining this function, this go-to-market engineer function. So, and looking with that from my perch, Becca, I see Clay as this organization that brings intent and data enrichment together with AI agents that helps reps build a bespoke, tailored message, allowing them to target, meet, and close prospects. Does that sound like a pretty good description?
Hey, we're hiring, Bill. If you want if you want to join, I would this is the way that I think about Clay. It's really like in this go to market infrastructure kind of bucket, right? You call out like the use cases for reps, but like if you think about go to market infrastructure, it's actually everything that aligns all revenue and go to market functions, right? So marketing, obviously sales, post sales, so on and so forth. And really what Clay allows you to do, you caught a couple pieces of it, right? But kind of blend together your first party data with third party data, right? Well, obviously, we're a data marketplace. We have, almost 200 different data providers on our marketplace that you can kind of bring into the fold. You can bring in AI data points into the fold. So things like, hey, show me the increase in headcount, or show me accounts that are losing market share to EMEA-based competitors, right? To play on what we were talking about earlier, incorporating that into one place so that everybody can work off of it. So you can push it into audiences and push it into an ads platform so that your marketing team's targeting the right people, and you can arm your reps with that, along with, hey, by the way, here's what's happening in their business. Here's the right message. Here's the right person to reach out to, and here's the contact information for that person. So it's almost like the brain hive for your entire go to market organization, if that makes sense.
Mm, I like the brain hive. I like that term to be able to drop in there. So does that, if I'm a sales rep, then if I take all of that and I'm are like your value prop is what I'm getting at here. If I am a sales rep, do Clay, what would I call them? Clay enabled sales reps sell more than their peers. Is that like when you put your pencil down, Becca, and your sales team's out there selling, someone says, hey, why are we going to go spend X amount of dollars with you guys? Is it because they're going to outperform the non-enabled type of rep?
Yes. And actually, last year we had a session at Sculpt, which is our user conference. Stevie Vanta, who's actually incredible. You should have her on the podcast
She
next to
is.
talk about some of the things that she's doing with AI. I was listening eagerly. She did a session at our user conference last year where she talked about the productivity gains and the time savings of her reps pre-Clay and post-Clay. And it was pretty astounding. I actually asked her for the time study. I can share it with you. You can send it out, or share a version of it out with the listeners of the podcast. But at a rep level, right, you should be using Clay because it's going to help you sell more. At the RevOps and leadership level, you should obviously you care about rep productivity and increasing rep productivity. But the way that you do it is you can take what your best reps are doing, the things that they're looking at, the research that they're doing into accounts, and apply that at scale to the entire sales force that you have. So it's almost like the more reps you have, the more juice you get from Clay,
Yeah.
honestly. And then it kind of ties into when we bought it at DBT, we bought it for a bunch of different use cases, but it ties into things like territory carving, making sure that books are equal, right? Because that can be the number one hit to rep productivity is unequal territories and unequal productivity. There's a lot of different rabbit holes you can go down, but yeah, at its core, if you're a Clay enabled rep, you're going to sell more, and if you have a Clay enabled sales force and marketing force, to the moon, man.
Ah, God, this is the holy grail. I kicked off this year talking with a ton of peers like yourself that are outside of the battery portfolio companies, inside the battery portfolio companies. And I was really trying to extract that as they built their next fiscal year plans, this current fiscal year, what was the metric from the revenue side that you're looking to realize from the advent and the usage of AI, of bringing AI into our businesses, whether it's kind of the off the shelf LLM stuff or buying packaged products like Clay? How are they measuring? And everybody said, well, I'd obviously love to see my quotas be able to go up. Now, quotas are only a proxy, though, right? The reality is we want to see productivity per AE go up. And I said, do you have any before or after? Have you like modeled that for this year? And a lot of people are like, no, we're going to use this year to see it. So your story about Stevie, the fact that she already had pre and post data just puts her farther ahead than what the average probably revenue leader that I'm seeing out there could do.
Yeah, well, I feel like what typically happens, and I have a lot of admiration for Stevie and what she's built at Vanta, but a lot of times what happens in those planning cycles is we say, okay, hey, and by the way, we need to increase productivity by 10%, and what are the bets that we're making, right? And you kind of tie a bet to a percentage, and fingers crossed, and you hope it works. I think her approach of here's the baseline, and I want I could ask her, I should probably ask her how often they do that baseline to then measure the things that they're testing against, because she's doing all sorts of stuff. She's obviously they're avid Clay users. They're using Dust, which we use internally, and we're finding a ton of use cases for, right? How often she runs that time study against her team.
Pretty interesting stuff. I think a lot of revenue leaders listening to this will hopefully take away the action item of if I'm not doing it, I should probably start thinking about as I do implement AI things inside of my organization, how do I measure the impact of it? So continuing there, Becca, obviously and you saw my hand raised at quite a few steps there, right? Like, there's territory management that you're helping with. There's the first and third party data. There's all these different sources, so we can guess how Clay uses Clay, but tell me a little bit about a customer journey for a customer. Do they typically come in and start with the free version, get some type of value that they're recognizing, and then kind of lever themselves up to more paid versions or something like that? Or is it a blend of both inbound as well as your team using the Clay product to run the Clay playbook to go get customers?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, look, we are a kind of PLG born business, so there are a lot of businesses that come in and just start with kind of our PLG motion and are running, Clay tables and different plays. I would say that the vast majority of the folks that my team works with, and here's the crazy part, Bill. I don't know if you've ever worked for a technology that has this type of reaction, where we'll call into an account or we'll run an event, or gosh, this happened last week. I invited someone. We talked about this. We ran our own CRO summit, right? And I invited a CRO based out of Denver, and I said, hey, it's probably a long shot, but if you're in San Francisco this week, would love to have you. Would love to host you at our summit. And that person replied and said, I can't, but I've heard so much about Clay, and I want to learn more about how we can use it, right? And the conversation, because we talked to so many of that profile of company, we were able to say, hey, look, here's the core problem we solve. Here's actually what the teams on the kind of leading AI edge are doing with Clay. Here are the things that you should be doing, and here's the playbook 0 to 1 on how to go do it with Clay, right? So it's Sometimes we see people graduate up through the PLG motion, right? But oftentimes my team's reaching out, or we have, I mean, Bill, we have like, I feel like 12 events a week. I could spend my entire life going to our events, right? Um, and we see a lot of people there. We meet a lot of people there who say very similar things. I've been meaning to reach out to you guys. We need to be using AI better. I hear all about Clay. And that's actually the genesis of where a lot of people get onto the platform. And usually we start with like 2 or 3 use cases, but then you move up to, I don't know if I can use their names, 2 of the, large model builders, right? Using Clay in an almost end-to-end fashion for most aspects of their business.
Okay. So you just touched on something really interesting, the CRO summit. You're doing a lot of events, and then earlier in the episode here, you mentioned marketing, sales, and post sales. Who is your most common buyer? Does the lead flow come from the sales, like that CRO that you invite to an event, and they're like, can't make it or can make it, but by the way, I want to talk to you about this, or is it more marketing driven? Or other one that would jump into my mind is revenue operations. I would imagine that you probably get a decent amount of pull from that persona.
Well, think about who has to implement. Think about it sort of like in a go-to-market play fashion, right? I'm sure most people who listen to this podcast have sat in a meeting and someone says, "We've got to go generate $50 million, whatever, $50 million of pipeline next quarter. How are we gonna do it?" And everybody has all these different plays. Well, we could do, people who've bought our software before and moved to another company. Or what about targeting companies as they're bringing on our software, right? They just crossed this threshold of employees, right? And they're throwing out all these different plays. Who's the person who has to go and run and build that and do all of the legwork? It's the RevOps team, right? So usually, like we primarily work with the RevOps team to make the dreams of the CRO and the CMO become a reality, right? So like that's their win, and then the CRO and the CMO they're getting pipeline, right? Whether that's that new pipeline, that's coming in from ads, whether that's outbound pipeline generated from their SDR and AE team, whether that's cross sell upsell pipeline, like that's the prize.
Okay, got it. Good to know where this lands from that. All right, so I want to dive into the market that Clay is shaping and what you're seeing out there. But before
Sure.
we leave Clay, the business, the company, there's one last thing I wanted to call out because I think it's just super cool and love to have you riff on this. You would share with me a couple meetings ago that Clay gives every employee a budget to experiment with some AI tools. Can you share any details about that? And most importantly, any learnings that the company, the organization has picked up from that?
I was just talking to our head of operations or place operations, Tess, about this because obviously we're opening offices at a pretty rapid pace, and I had my whisper flow microphone, and I was talking into it, and she came over and laughed at me, and I said, "Actually, we like my entire team uses Whisperflow, and this is something that I picked up when I first joined." And someone said, "Yeah, you're correct." So basically, any tool, it's primarily AI tools that our team is you know checking out and playing around with, but you actually just pop into a Slack channel. You say, "I'd like access to this," or "Can I have a ramp card for this amount every month?" It gets issued and you can go and try out different tools, which a lot of companies, I've actually talked to a lot of peers who've said, "Oh, our company clamped down on that. They want it centralized and, so on and so forth." And I should think it's a competitive advantage for us, right? Because it means that my team, they're spending, call it single digits percentage of their time going and checking out new tools. But if we find, one more whisper flow or one more, lovable that we can go and implement across the team, right? That's productivity. That's we call it go to market alpha, right?
I think that is so cool. That go to market alpha idea is such a bleeding, like forward looking concept. I think it probably goes to one of the reasons that you guys are doing well in the marketplace. Is it's not just a great product and innovation on that side, it's what you're doing internally in the organization. Also makes me wonder if Whisperflow knows that story.
Well, now
that
they
kind of.
do. I don't know. They came to our office. They brought a bunch of the little microphones. I've got one on my desk.
Okay.
Almost every single person on my team uses it, which is
All
pretty
right,
wild.
cool, cool, super good one. All right, so let's shift away from Clay.com, the company, the AI innovator in the go-to-market space, and let's talk about, I think, the question du jour, Becca, because this is the one that as I talked to peers of ours out in the marketplace and just asked and mentioned that I was going to be having you on the podcast, that everybody was really interested in, is this topic of the revenue function evolving with this role called the go-to-market engineer. Clay has really, I think, helped define or define itself. Can you share from your perspective? I think this is what people are really interested to know is from the perspective inside of Clay, what is this role and what does it do?
Yeah. Well, so it's funny you ask inside Clay versus external because let's talk about external first, right? Um, I describe the go-to-market engineer as the perfect blend between like your smartest SDR who's on the ground, sees what's happening in the market. They have really cool play ideas, right? Mixed with your best revenue operations person who's like got a major GSD attitude, right? And just goes and takes an idea and runs with it. And like that's what a go-to-market engineer is. They're close enough to the business to have the context, but they're technical enough from a revenue operations or a systems perspective to be able to be call it like a 10x employee. And I really like businesses that sit at the intersection of how do we take the business context to the person who builds, right? So that we can make the boat go faster, so to speak, right? So externally, that's like the go-to-market engineering role. And like it, we talked about Stevia Vanta earlier, like she has a go-to-market engineering team, right? Block has a go-to-market engineering team who's responsible for taking these ideas, taking them to the next level and making them scalable. Now, internally at Clay, obviously we have an internal go-to-market engineer team, but I think the thing that's interesting about our sales force here at Clay is we call our sellers go-to-market engineers because that's oftentimes what they're doing. They're using Clay in their day-to-day to be more productive, to go run different plays, right? To automate certain portions of things like prep, follow-up, outreach, right? And so like we our own internal sales team is kind of expected to be tooling around with Clay and figuring out how to be more productive and then scaling it out. We scale it out across the rest of the team. So every time that you talk to a seller here at Clay, you're talking to a go-to-market engineer who can take the business context, the technical context, and give you something that you can run with.
Makes total sense. Makes total sense for the seller that you're selling to and the, like I said, the market definition that you're creating for internally that to be there. I think probably a lot of the people that are going to tune in and listen to this podcast are thinking about this role inside the organization. Some are doing it. Some of them are, I'm sure, Clay customers already, and then some are thinking about doing it. And I get asked this all the time: is what is this role evolving from? So you just mentioned a mashup of your smart top SDR and your RevOps person there. Do you have any signal on like as people are hiring this role, are they taking from their SDRs? Are they taking from the RevOps, traditional RevOps thing? Are they taking from sales engineering? That's got an engineering word in it too, Becca. So I mean, like who knows? Like, do you have any insight into where you're seeing companies that create this role? What the genesis of that starts from?
I think those are the three places that I see it coming from. But I think about it less of like a team and more about like the attributes. So like if I think about one of our GTMEs based out of London, her name's Caroline. This is the second company that I have worked with Caroline at. Um, and in my mind, when we brought Play on at my previous company, she was the GTME, right? Because she was close enough to the business. She was an SDR at the time. She'd kind of moved into like an SDR leadership productivity role. She was close enough to the business, but she had this aptitude. She has this like tinkering mindset. And so initially I thought maybe go into ops, and this is before, this is before Clay burst onto the scene. I was like, this is really what I want you to do. I want you to take the plays that I want to run, Carol, and then I want you to go and build them in Salesforce so that we can scale it out, right? And like I think if I think about the people that are moving into go-to-market engineer roles, it's like they have a systems brain, right? They understand and can build data flows, but they're curious enough, and oftentimes they're embedded enough in the business, and they get excitement from being in the deals. Like those are the people that I would target because I think it scratches both itches for them.
So next question along these lines of the go-to-market engineer is the engineerification, if that's such a word, of sales, of the revenue function. I continue to see new titles pop up like go-to-market engineer, Gen AI engineer, AI builder. They all kind of point back towards your tinkering comment, where these are roles where sometimes I'm seeing them have they have more computer sciencey degrees. Sometimes they have scripting skills. They have database skills. They're not your average cut from the central casting of what a typical RevOps or sales ops type person has come from in the past. Are you seeing the similar thing? Are you seeing a little bit more of an engineering mindset come into the Rev org?
Oh yeah. I mean, and maybe this comes from, my background in more infrastructure based companies, right? Like the best sellers at my previous place used to be sales engineers, right? Or data folks practitioners. Same thing here, right? Some of our best GTMEs internally were practitioners before they came to Clay. And part of the reason that they came to Clay was because they loved the product so much. But I think across the board, so I'm seeing that. I think the thing that if I were to hire someone from a more computer sciencey background into that role, it's, hey, how do I get them the right business context? Because we can go build and tinker with cool things all day. How do we make sure that it's actually driving
It's interesting.
business results? So I'll give an example. Internally, we're building our own kind of like co-pilot, right? We call it Terra. And the PM who's on that comes and talks to me pretty frequently, and we talk about, okay, what are the things that we want Terra to do? And Terra could do some really cool things. But I think part of it is like, hey, let's actually start with the basics, right? Are we multi-threading out in our accounts? Show me all the places where we're not multi-threading out. How do we help the rep go and do things like that that actually drive good outcomes for the business versus, you could come up with some pretty wild ideas of how AI can help. It's just about, hey, what is the business problem or the part of the sales process, for example, that we're actually trying to impact? Let's focus there, and how do we make it better versus start at the pie in the sky and work our way down. That's what I'd be thinking about, but I'm definitely seeing a lot of that, the kind of tinkering CS engineering mindset, coming into RevOps and even into revenue.
Got it. And if you look out the windshield and look at the next 12 or 24 months, do you have any ideas of where this really evolves to? I mean, you just talked about your sales reps are GTM engineers, so I assume they're managing their own. What's the term back here? Is it clay agents or clay agents? What's the proper one for you guys in terms? Like,
Well, the Claygent is the thing that goes out and does the AI work for you. So, like, I'll give an
okay,
example. We work with a waste management company, and they're using Claygent to go out and see the color of dumpsters in front of businesses they're targeting because they have different takeout rates for different competitors. That's what Claygent does.
okay,
Internally, my team manages a lot. Yeah, my team manages a lot of sales agents in like Dust and things like that. And I'm sure a bunch of other tools that I haven't seen quite yet that'll catch on here, like wildfire. But yeah, I mean, I would say that the average GTME here is using Claygen, a lot of different agents to do their work.
okay, got it. And let's talk about the future of selling a little bit here. One role we've talked about a few times in this conversation is the SDR role. How do you see that evolving? Or let me ask it this way. Uh, I have the fortune of meeting with a lot of students that are in their like junior and senior year of college, and obviously a lot of like people that aspire to be in the sales area. the traditional path was they come out of school and they go become an SDR. So if you put those two questions together there, like the SDR role, how do you see it evolving? And if you were speaking with a student that was graduating in the next 12 months or so, and they were saying, Becca, what do I do? I want to be a sales rep. Like, what's my role look like? What advice would you give that?
Oof. Well, so actually, let's start here. A lot of people, when they first meet me and find out that I work at Clay, they say, "Oh, why are you building an SDR team?" Right? And I think there's like two pieces to a good SDR team. We call them Claydrs here, right? The first is, hey, it's a pipeline generation motion, right? Outbound and servicing the inbound that we get, which is quite abundant at Clay. The second is a talent funnel. I literally before this in my meeting before this called our Claydrs a stem cell, right? Because they're learning the business context to go and be anything else in the organization, like, on the ops team, the partnerships team, the recruiting team, the post sales team, right? Like there's a lot of potential there that you can go and build on. Um, this is good practice because I'm gonna go talk to a bunch of student athletes at Cal in a couple months who are going to graduate, and hopefully some of them will come work at Clay. If I was thinking about trying to enter the sales organization right now, I think the first thing is I would get really good at using a tool like Claude, right? Like I think that that is a must-have skill. In fact, a part of our interview process is how are you using AI today to to um, to automate different workflows that you have, right? So however you use it, right? Whatever something that you do that's repetitive in your life today, doesn't have to be work related. Like figure out how to use that and weaponize that really well. And then the second thing is like just go and learn and listen. I think that a lot of people who are interviewing for a Clay DR role or an SDR role right now forget that just honestly showing up, being curious about someone's business goes a long way still, right? And so that's actually the advice that I give to my Clay DRs that want to move into something else here. It's like, hey, learn as much as you can, especially about the business, because the people that are most valuable in organizations oftentimes are the people that have the most context and then can go and take action on it, which is why I think that go-to-market engineer role is actually going to be a pretty central function in a lot
Mhm.
of organizations in a couple of years, if not already.
It's you see it taking shape right now. So I agree with you on the advice that I give to younger people or just embarking on their career. I give them a little pop quiz where I'll just ask, hey, first things first, are you using some type of agent? And then next is, are you spanning across multiple agents? Because we're watching like one tool is running really well. Don't get vendor lock in too soon. I
Sure.
ask questions like, are you using voice, like your whisper flow example? Are you using
Yeah.
voice to communicate with the LLM, or are you using the old school? Because like this, I think we're going to see less of, and the technology on just doing voice back and forth is getting great. I asked them that, look, you all have one of these in your favorites bar. Do you have a LLM, or is it like good old your search, your internet search? Like I do these it's like my little pop quiz where it's my, I guess, AI readiness. And what I'll do is I
Yeah.
don't give them a score, but I just, in asking the question, I think I'm hopefully leading them to think a little bit about, well, am I doing that? But I think more importantly, back to your answer, there is, you're doing something that I think most companies I speak with, and what I consider to be a smart interviewer, is coming in and saying, look, let's not talk about AI. Why don't you show me AI? At tons of sales kickoffs this year, I heard about sales leaders assigning some type of task. I posted it up on my LinkedIn and I got really interesting feedback. Some that was like, gosh, I hadn't thought of this. Isn't the best idea, to like, hey, if you asked me to come to a thing and do homework, I wouldn't come to the kickoff. So it spanned the whole gamut there. But anyways, I
Interesting.
think the show me what you're doing, that to me tells me someone's AI fluency more than anything.
Yeah, and they, in an interview context or setting, right? I try to avoid the hey, just pop open Claude and show me your last prompt, right? But what I'm listening for is like, do they understand how data flows through a system, and then what are they doing with AI to make that system move faster or to automate specific steps? Because again, coming back to like, what are the skills that are really valuable right now? Valuable for us and valuable for other companies. It's Do you understand the flow of data? Do you understand the bottlenecks and where human intervention is required, and what are you doing to remove yourself from that? Like, I and you would be surprised at some of the things that I see. We do a lot of these interviews. We probably do, I don't know, 100 plus of them a month, and I still see things that really amaze me, right? Including people who say, "I don't use it at all today," which, obviously, I take the time to help them, like, "Hey, what's a process that you wish you could automate? Like, let's go figure out how to do it together," right? Because that's the future.
That's great. Well, you talked about tying it to the business flow. That's super critical. Like I'm in a similar spot to you. I don't run a sales organization right now, but I support a bunch of battery companies that do. And then I talk with people like yourself that are outside of battery. And like you and I traded notes about Benjamin Pittman over at Cube Software. And I have probably a dozen equivalent leaders like Benjamin that I call and I'll be like, what are you doing this week? And sometimes they'll just send me the link of what they're doing and let me
Oh,
go
yeah.
pop into it. Sometimes they'll like send me screenshots. Sometimes they'll get on the phone with me and they'll walk through. But I am so excited by like to be a revenue leader right now. Your your learning curve should hopefully be so far up and to the right. Like I always say this back. I'm saying this all the time. I don't want to be the SaaS guy living in an AI world. All right. Like
You're
I
not,
still
Bill. You're one of the most, like, on the edge leaders. Like, I talk to a lot of folks in your role, and, like, I'm impressed. Even, like, we met last year, your thesis around agent to agent buying. Like, you're out there. You're in it, man.
Look, I'll do some dating here. I lived through the internet coming into business. I lived through the cloud.com. I lived through mobile. Like this is that level of a transition. And so, like I said, I just don't want to be left behind. I don't want to be the old dog. So um, it's just really cool to watch. Okay, couple questions just to close us out here, Becca. One, you've mentioned Dust, you've mentioned Whisper Flow. Any other really cool technologies that you've seen or that your organization is using that are worth calling out here?
I think those are the 2 that I use the most. I obviously, we use both Claude and ChatGPT here, but I think the depth in Dust is something that I think makes it on the surface, you say, "Okay, this is one use case," but when you dig a little bit further, there's the depth of use case that you can have for something like that is it's so malleable, and then you can share it and use it with other people. Like, that's where I'm spending a lot of my time these days, is just getting better at that, honestly.
Okay. Okay. It'll be interesting. This podcast will post in a couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to see the inbound on Justin Whisper Flow. They'll have to call you and give you a referral agreement here, Becca. Well, look, this has been great. Is there anything that we didn't touch on or cover on that you wanted to make sure you ticked the box before we wrapped up? I always like just to close on that in case there was something that we didn't like tread across.
Man, the only thing that I'll say, and it'll be a shameless plug for Clay, right? We're helping build the next generation of AI equipped sellers, and we're hiring in San Francisco, New York, and London really aggressively. So, like, come join us if you want to build the next generation of go to market sellers, basically. And
Killer
then
Beck.
we can cut this, but Bill, what tool are you using? That's really what I want to know. What
Oh,
am I not using that Bill Binch is using?
I just mentioned the voice thing.
Yeah,
I am leaning all in on trying to transition myself from a keyboard or like a mobile interface to a voice one. So I've been trying a bunch of those. Granola lately has been the one that I just started delving
granola's great.
into. But I want to make that transition because I don't think a keyboard is a natural interface between humans and technology. I think our voices are, but we've trained ourselves to think in a way that we write bullets.
Yep.
Whereas if I can transition my mindset to go from that old school thinking to a voice based one, so voice really has got me um, really kind of like I guess you could say I'm a little bit focused in that area.
You know what's crazy? I forgot to even talk about granola because I view it as table stakes now. I met someone at that CRO summit that wasn't using granola, and I pulled up my phone, I pulled up the app, and I was like, let me just I'll send you the bullet points from our conversation about how all these leaders are using AI. It was
Well, Well, I
Forgot
think
about that.
Becca, you were at so I did that CRO dinner series last year,
Yeah.
and you came to one of the earlier ones in New York, and I left that, and someone called me out. They called me out. I don't know if you remember, I was over in the corner at like a dark bar restaurant with my laptop up taking notes, and someone called me out and they said, Bill, do you find the irony of you hosting a CRO meetup to talk about AI and you're there taking notes by hand? And I was like, touche,
Yeah.
challenge accepted. And the next night, guess what? I wasn't taking notes anymore.
I love it.
So it's totally real, totally real.
Immediate feedback loop. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that was
So,
good stuff. Well, Becca, you made this easy. Thank you so much for spending a little time with us
well,
today. I really appreciate it.
thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.